Well, welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Public Works Infrastructure Committee for June 8th. That's right, 2023. I'm Andrew Johnson. I'm the chair of the committee, and I was excited to see that our committee today was gavelled in by a future Public Works Department leader, William. So thank you, William, and Minneapolis resident. Thank you. Well, at this time, we'll have the clerk call the roll to verify a quorum of the committee.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Wansley.
Present.
Vita.
Present.
Chugtai.
Present.
Vice Chair Koski.
Present.
Chair Johnson.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum for our committee. With that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. There are 7 items on the consent agenda, which I will read for the record. The first is authorizing the submittal of a grant application for the U.S. DOT for the 2023 Safe Streets for All program. The second is approving the concept layout for the Green Central Safe Routes to School project. The third and fourth items are approving appointments to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committees. The fifth item is accepting an additional grant for the Metropolitan Council to fund cured-in-place pipelining and repairs of existing sewers. The sixth item is setting a public hearing for July 27th to consider assessments for snow and ice removal from public sidewalks that remain unpaid. Item number 7 is approving a legislative directive related to the potential to expand the Met Council's transit assistance program through Met Transit to a partnership with the city of Minneapolis. And with that, is there any discussion on the consent agenda, or are there any items that anyone would like to pull for further discussion? Just a second. Not seeing any. All those in favor of our consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. And that motion carries. Now we will move on to our discussion item. Number 8, municipal sidewalk plowing analysis and update. Our discussion item today is receiving and filing a report on a high-level analysis of a potential city-led sidewalk snow and ice removal program. Director Anderson Kelleher, who will be presenting on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Today, the presentation will be handled by 2 folks who've worked very closely leading this team. Joe Powman, who's the Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair, and Cadence Novak, Pedestrian and Bicycle Coordinator, Transportation Planning and Programming. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd just like to say a couple things as we begin.
Please, Director.
So I think one of the things that folks are going to be interested in is why are these numbers so different than the previous study that was done? And context setting, that study was studying only municipal sidewalk shoveling when there was a snow emergency. So this study, based on the legislative directive, is to our ordinance, which is what we expect residents to do today, what we expect businesses to do today, and that is to bare pavement after any sort of snow event. Of course, currently, and you'll hear about this, there are 2 different timelines for residents versus businesses in terms of clearing the sidewalk. But that is a major difference between the previous report and today's report, and I think it's an important context setting as Mr. Powman gets going.
Thank you, Director, and welcome Mr. Powman and Ms. Novak to discuss this item and present. And for colleagues, I will note if we have consent on this, I would like that we hold questions until the end of the presentation so we can get through the material. And then also want to recognize that Public Works, I think this was actually due in another cycle from now. Is that right, Director? So,
Mr. Chair and committee members, yes, it was due in the next cycle, and we worked hard, we pushed hard, pushed everyone to get this done a little bit earlier for everyone here to be able to hear, read, and then any follow-up that we might have out of it.
Thank you, Director. I'll just personally say I appreciate that we're seeing it a little earlier as we're all in discussions as well around what our budget priorities are with the administration. It's particularly helpful to have it early and appreciate the team working ahead of schedule on this one. So thank you. All right, Mr. Palman, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Director. Good afternoon, Chair Johnson and committee members. My name is Joe Palman, and we are here today to present the final report on the legislative directive on city-led sidewalk snow and ice removal. As a quick overview, our presentation will consist of some context setting, including review of the legislative directive, an assessment of current programs and what sidewalk snow and ice removal looks like in Minneapolis today, and a high-level analysis of what a city-led sidewalk clearing program would look like, including the fiscal elements of that program. Additionally, we will present an analysis of an interactive online tool that could be used to track snow clearing operations in the city, draft proposals of other snow and ice removal programs, and upcoming work. In February of this year, the Minneapolis City Council's Public Works and Infrastructure Committee requested a nonpartisan, multidisciplinary review of the following. A high-level analysis of potential city-led sidewalk snow and ice removal programs that could be fully implemented by the winter of 2027, a fiscal analysis of implementing a phased-in city-led sidewalk plowing and snow removal program that would begin in 2024 with the pedestrian priority network, expanding to our entire city network by 2027. Draft proposals of potential snow and ice removal programs and efforts to primarily target aging communities and properties with a documented pattern of noncompliance with Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, Title 17, Chapter 445. A high-level evaluation of a potential web-based interactive tool that could track winter maintenance activities. An assessment of the current snow and ice removal programs, including special service districts, colleges and universities, neighborhood associations, and contractual programs that are utilized or partnered with any departments within the enterprise. And finally, recommendations on how the city can ensure a city-wide sidewalk plowing and snow removal program is equitably implemented. For a quick review of our city by the numbers, we have about 1,000 miles of streets and approximately 1,910 miles of sidewalks. To provide some context, 1,910 miles is pretty close to the distance that it would take to drive from Minneapolis to San Diego. So we have a large system. 596 miles of our sidewalk system are located within the pedestrian priority network. In Minneapolis, we average 52 inches of snow each winter from about 23 snow events involving accumulation, with an average of 50 events involving a trace of precipitation or greater. In addition, blowing snow and freeze-thaw cycles provide for the possibility of slippery sidewalk conditions throughout the winter. Currently in Minneapolis, sidewalk, snow, and ice control is a combined effort between residential and commercial and industrial properties, the city enterprise, including public works, special service districts, community planning and economic development, agency partners such as Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, Metro Transit, college and universities, neighborhood programs, and all other properties. Under Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, Title 17, Chapter 445, property owners are responsible for clearing snow and ice from the sidewalks that are adjacent to the properties they own. Single-family homes and duplexes are given 24 hours after a snowfall is ended to clear snow and ice full width to bare pavement, while other properties have 4 hours after the snowfall is ended. Now, the map on the screen shows the different property types in Minneapolis, with the commercial and industrial properties being in blue. The orange properties are multifamily residential, and that chartreuse color being our single-family residential properties. In performing a high-level analysis of a potential city-led program, our assumptions and calculations were based on meeting our current bare pavement ordinance and providing a level of service at least equal to, but ideally better than what we see each winter for conditions on our sidewalks. We realize that we don't have 100% compliance right now. This graph shows the total snowfall each winter along with the number of complaints received, cases created, sidewalk cleanups authorized, and the actual number of cleanups that were completed. Each winter we receive a pretty high number of complaints that ultimately result in a lower number of contractor cleanups. Again, sidewalk clearing to the city ordinance needs to be full width, bare pavement with treatment of icy areas. In trying to find photos for this report, we found that we do a very good job of taking photos of non-compliance, but sometimes we don't stop and appreciate sidewalks that are well done. So the one in the upper left could even be a little bit better. A citywide program would include public sidewalks in the city right-of-way, with property owners still having responsibility for driveways, carriage walks, other private sidewalks, and areas around trash and recycling carts. A quick distinction between snow clearing and snow removal. Snow clearing involves pushing or blowing snow to the boulevard where it is stored, while snow removal involves loading and trucking snow to a large snow storage area in a different location. Our sidewalk network does have a number of areas where there is no boulevard to store snow, particularly in the pedestrian priority network, which would require snow to be removed from those areas throughout the winter. These photos show city sidewalk snow removal efforts in a couple of Twin Cities suburbs. In both cases, the removal is being performed by a snow blower. Snow blower attachments are very good at clearing large amounts of snow, but do not get to bear payment due to the metal shoes that are on the bottom of the blower that elevate the snow blower slightly off of the pavement. The sidewalks in this picture would not comply with our current city ordinance. The method outlined in our report to achieve compliance with city ordinance involves two passes, one with a blower as shown in the previous photos, followed immediately with a skid loader with a broom attachment that would clear sidewalks to bare pavement. These photos show the machine with a blower attachment as well as the skid loader with a broom attachment that we included in our analysis. The crews that would be used to perform sidewalk clearing would consist of full-time and temporary seasonal labor. Next, I will outline the fiscal analysis of a potential city-led sidewalk snow and ice program and the associated capital and operating costs. Year one of a phased-in program would consist of the 596 miles of sidewalks on the pedestrian priority network. It's estimated to cost $9.7 million in capital costs plus operating costs of $17.5 million for an estimated year one cost of $27.2 million. Year two would add an additional 657 miles with a capital cost of $11.4 million and an operating cost, which would include the PPN plus the additional 667 miles of $29.5 million. Year three would add the final 657 miles of sidewalk in the system at a capital cost of $8.4 million plus $39.4 million in operating cost, the operating cost for our entire system, for a total of $47.8 million. Here again are the yearly capital costs, which include the McLean Tier 4 snow blowers, Bobcat skid loaders with broom attachments, trucks and trailers, as roughly 80% of our fleet would need to be hauled to a specific location in the city to begin the snow clearing process, support equipment and de-icing equipment, and equipment for our mechanics as well. Operating costs include capital equipment replacement, diesel fuel, de-icing materials, maintenance, snow removal, and labor. Next, we will look at a possible online interactive tool and the associated implementation costs. This shows a cost estimate to create a public-facing plowing status map that could include streets and sidewalks. Currently, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, as well as some other metro cities, offer a map of this type. Costs including setup, telematics, web application development, and maintenance are shown here. For the street system, there would be an estimated $255,000 in one-time costs, with $45,000 in ongoing costs. Adding sidewalks would have a $221,000 price tag in one-time costs with $43,000 ongoing. Both maps together would have a total estimated cost of $476,000 in one-time costs with $88,000 in ongoing costs. With that, I will pass it over to Cadence Novak for the next part of the report.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Novak.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chair and Council members. In this section, I'll share more about the assumptions underpinning the staged phasing of a 3-year scenario, as well as the benefits, challenges, and additional considerations regarding a potential city-led municipal sidewalk clearing program. Phasing in a potential city-led clearing operation for the entire 1,910-mile sidewalk network would begin with the 596-mile pedestrian priority network, which represents where people frequently walk. The remaining 1,310 miles of sidewalk would be phased in over year 2 and year 3 in roughly equal amounts of 657 miles each year. We used the 2023 Racial Equity Framework for Transportation Equity Priority Areas, also known as TEP areas, to guide the high-level phasing in of community areas in year 2 and year 3. TEP scores reflect policy priorities and community input regarding how transportation projects should be prioritized across a city, with the score representing the highest priority out of 5 possible tiers. In year 2, the Camden, Central, Longfellow, Near North, Northeast, Phillips, Powderhorn, and University community areas would be phased in, as these 8 community areas most closely align with census tracts that have a transportation equity priority score of 1 through 4. In year 3, the Calhoun Isles, Nokomis, and Southwest community areas would be phased in. These 3 community areas are almost entirely composed of census tracts that received a TEP score of 4 or 5, the lowest priority tiers. Benefits of a potential city-led municipal sidewalk clearing program. Consistent predictability and reliability of sidewalk system for all users. This would align with our transportation action plan goals around mode shift. There would be substantial, although not entire, relief of the physical responsibility of snow clearing for property owners on property, but it would be a substantial relief on the public sidewalk clearing. There would be a reduction of the proactive winter sidewalk inspection program for staff. There would be a replacement of the corner clearing operation that we currently perform with the municipal snow clearing operation. And we would anticipate a substantial reduction in 311 calls related to snow and ice sidewalk complaints. Although such a program is not without many challenges, a city-led clearing operation may not happen as quickly as it's currently performed for many properties by property owners and tenants on those properties. Phasing in a citywide program will require community education to make sure residents and property owners are aware of their responsibilities that are in the year 2 and year 3 phased in areas to make sure that they are still clearing until their area is phased in subsequent years. Freeze-thaw cycles will continue to present challenges for crews and the public. Inability to pile snow on private property means the city must haul snow that previously stayed near the sidewalk. There might be potential damages to personal property, such as retaining walls, turf, other ornamental or vegetative plants from city equipment. And there are staffing and labor shortages anticipated based on current conditions. Additional considerations that we don't have all of the answers to, but were considered as part of compiling this report, are that there will be increased negative environmental impacts of these operations by adding diesel-powered snow removal equipment. So those are the snow blowers and the broom brush attachment machines. Although we did look at potential electric alternatives, there's nothing available on the market that really meets our needs and would present challenges to be able to recharge those in the field without a power source. There would also be increased salt, sand, and alternative de-icing materials citywide. And there would also be increased noise pollution, especially in order to clear within 24 hours of the end of a snowfall, having equipment outside people's homes around the clock at night. There are potential levy impacts as well. The currently planned 2024 city property tax levy right now is at $472 million, which represents a 6.2% increase over last year's levy. A new city-led sidewalk clearing program in 2024 would add roughly the same amount of money increase as all other planned cost increases. In this section, I will share 5 pilot concepts with a deeper dive into the available 311 data to better understand what models and what types of targeted programs may be effective for properties with a documented pattern of noncompliance. It is key to understand the scale, frequency, location, and distribution of reported cases, confirmed violations, authorized contractor cleanups, and proactive sidewalk inspections both within a season and year over year. Beginning with a potential senior snow clearing assistance program, this would be a partnership between the city and community associations based on local models and high-level findings from other cities. As seniors age 65 years and over live throughout the city, a targeted program for seniors would work best when led and coordinated by neighborhood organizations. The Department of Neighborhood and Community Relations could partner with these neighborhood organizations to hire workers within those neighborhoods and coordinate service at the grassroots level. We do know from our data that some of the highest concentration of senior residents are in the St. Anthony West, Nicollet Island, Elliott Park, and Seward neighborhoods. We also have additional higher rates of seniors compared to the city overall in the Chain of Lake areas, the Minnehaha Creek Corridor, and the West River Parkway Corridor. Digging into patterns of noncompliance, this slide will go through each of 7 years of hotspot data for complaints and compare that to property types in the city of Minneapolis. So while sidewalk, snow, and ice complaints impact every area within the city, when we look at hotspots of complaints year after year, so I'm clicking through the 2016 through 2017 winter and subsequent winters, the red and orange areas represent higher concentrations of complaints. Noting that the 2022 through 2023 winter season had more complaints logged than any other season. Compared to property types in the city of Minneapolis, we see that complaints are concentrated in denser areas of the city with multifamily housing, commercial and industrial parcels, and all of these property types constitute a disproportionate share of the snow and ice complaints compared to their share of property types overall. When we dig into the 311 data further, we find that while rental properties only constitute 18% of all parcels in the city, nearly 1/3 of all snow and ice sidewalk complaints are attributed to these rental properties. Looking at just multifamily housing, which includes townhomes, condos, and apartments, only 41% of it is renter occupied, yet these properties constitute 75% of all complaints tied to multifamily housing. Examining the 311 data property allows us to understand where and what property types have multiple complaints within a season, as well as where and what property types have complaints year after year. So this chart shows all of the complaints for properties in 2022 through 2023. So starting from the left of this chart, we have all of the parcels in the city represented in pink. The lower tier that scoots off at the bottom, that is representative of the 8,200 unique property addresses that received sidewalk, snow, and ice complaints this past winter. The two blue lines show which ones were cleared by the property owner and which ones were cleared by a contractor. So of those 8,200 non-compliant property addresses, 6,500 were cleared by the property owner. It should also be noted that all of these non-compliant properties only represent 6.3% of all properties in the city of Minneapolis, with 80% of non-compliant properties being cleared ultimately by the property owner. The tiny sliver here at the bottom right of the screen, 1,600 contractor cleanups, represents about 1% of all properties in the city of Minneapolis. When we also look at repeat offenders by property address year after year, starting on the left, these are properties that had a complaint for 1 year, and as you move to the right, cases for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and 7 years. So paying attention to the properties that had at least one complaint in 4 out of the last 7 years, we have 998, approximately 1,000 parcels in the city of Minneapolis that had violations 4 out of the 7 years, and these represent 18% of all complaints. 18% of 54,000 complaints, or approximately 9,700 complaints, are tied to less than 1,000 unique property addresses in the city of Minneapolis. When we look at repeat offenders within the same season, it is true that we had the highest number of repeat offenders this past winter at 1,939 unique property addresses, which is still 1.5% of all parcels in the city of Minneapolis. These approximately 2,000 property addresses are responsible for 24% of all complaints logged this winter season. So going through all this data allows us to understand what kinds of programs we might be able to think of that would address these problems, where they're happening, and why they're happening. So one potential program is the Snow Ambassador Pilot Program. This is not a new pilot program that's been shared with you all. This was something that was shared last fall and was shared at the time of the 2018 study as a potential idea. So 2 public works staff would continuously monitor 20 miles of the pedestrian priority network, and they would go ahead and proactively clear sidewalks that are in violation. The first time that a sidewalk is cleared at a property, it would be free. The second time, or any subsequent times, would be for a fee. This would also allow our staff to do direct outreach with property owners and or the resident to understand why these violations are happening. Another model is the mobile team model pilot. So this idea is that different geographies to be determined could be allocated an annual funding pool amount with an authorized contractor. And so when residents or property owners indicate that they need help or assistance clearing their sidewalk, maybe it's one-off, maybe it's for that season, they would be able to contact someone to arrange service for them. This would really potentially make a huge difference paired with another pilot program that's presented in the subsequent slide. An additional study is still required, but a potential snow caseworker pilot program specifically for residents. So we have data telling us where and how often complaints are happening. We don't have the qualitative data to understand why these are happening. Is it that someone, maybe they have a broken leg this year, maybe they just welcomed a new member of their family, maybe there's an illness, maybe they're a snowbird, maybe they just moved in and they're a first-time homeowner, and there's so many things that you have to learn. And sometimes you move in during a blizzard and you haven't purchased a shovel yet. So this would allow us to do direct outreach and engagement to collect that qualitative data to really understand where the breakdown in compliance is happening. It would be education-focused, not punitive. And connecting residents with snow clearing resources that could be available to maximize both of the program that's presented here and on the subsequent slide could really put a dent in some of these violations that are occurring. We also know from previous data and slides presented that rental properties have a disproportionate share of snow and ice sidewalk violations. And it is not fair to residents and the neighbors of rental families, rental, single, and multifamily housing properties when the sidewalk is uncleared because a property manager has not done that job satisfactorily. Additional study would be required, of course. Another potential program is authorizing contractor cleaning policy and program changes. Right now we have a set fee for each contractor cleanup. But if we adjust this, looking at different property types, so commercial, industrial, single and multifamily housing property types could potentially have a different fee amount set. Maybe that would alleviate some of the financial burden for single family housing compared to larger industrial lots. Potentially looking at the market value of the property, potentially tying it to how many feet of linear sidewalk are being cleared by the contractor, and then also having tiers for repeat cleanups. meaning that subsequent cleanups would be more costly than the first one to prevent people from relying on this as a service. The map on the right shows all of those problematic 998 repeat properties. The circles in orange represent properties that have the most complaints in 7 years. So, upcoming work, after the LD, of course. So there is an ongoing update to the pedestrian and bicycle winter maintenance study update, since it is focused on active transportation. And we will be looking at additional strategies that were identified in the Transportation Action Plan to include in the study update. It will also evaluate additionally newly identified alternative winter pedestrian and bicycling maintenance options and update the cost estimates and assumptions. That is expected later this year. And with that, we'll open it to questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Novak and Mr. Palman. Really appreciate that. I will see if any of our committee members have questions, and maybe just so I'm guessing we're going to have a number of questions for staff. Maybe we'll get through the questions first, and then if folks want comments afterwards, if possible, that would be ideal. So questions for our staff. I see Councilmember Payne.
It's more of a comment than a question. I just wanted to thank you for the thoroughness of this, and I think specifically the optionality that's presented here, because I think one of the challenges about this conversation has been is either we do nothing or it's going to cost us $40 million, and I just really appreciate that you've broken this down into so many different elements of what the challenge is. So not really a question, so I apologize for that.
No worries. Councilmember Payne, I think that was entirely appropriate. Thank you. Councilmember Chugtai.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Want to echo what Councilmember Payne just said. Really, really appreciate the thoroughness of what you presented here today, and also the report that is included in the LIMS file for those who are interested in that. I think this is really excellent and thorough work and gives us a lot to consider. And I know there is a massive price difference between what we studied back in 2018, what you studied back in 2018. I wasn't around for that. And what's in front of us today, and that we're just looking at different things. We're trying to provide the best possible service we can when we're looking at this work right now. So I've got a handful of questions for you, but wanted to first start by thanking you. If we go all the way back to one of the earlier slides when you're talking about context setting, there's like a chart on it that starts with like miles of street. So sorry. And then we'll just kind of go forward from here.
Bless you.
There we are. Okay, so in the report, I see us pretty frequently reference the 50 snow events per year, and that's the number we're working from when we calculate then costs, both capital, operating, ongoing. But I see an average number of snow events at 23. Can you help me understand why we're going with the 50 number when what I see over here is closer to less than half of that?
Mr. Palmer.
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, the 23 events are events that have an inch or more of accumulation, and the trace events are any accumulation on the sidewalk. And we wanted to include the trace events because we know that does have our property owners out clearing their sidewalk and would maybe not in every case, but in most cases have us have to mobilize in some form as well to comply with the ordinance.
Got it. No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, and then if we skip ahead to around the time we were talking about snow clearing, snow removal, there were like photos of that right there. So when you were presenting on this, there was I can't remember if it was a comment that you made just around, the pedestrian priority network not having boulevard space for us to store snow. Where is it going right now, and who's removing it?
Mr. Palman.
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, we think some of it is being removed right now. Some of it probably does stay there on the network, but it is also causing some of the sidewalks in those locations to currently not be compliant with the ordinance. So it is a very high number. We also, do not have the ability to place snow on private property, where maybe if someone cleared their own sidewalk, they would. Also, I think, the majority of that being in the pedestrian priority network, some SSDs or the DID might potentially be involved in hauling some of the snow away currently as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes,
I just
Director.
want to emphasize one point. As a longtime homeowner, there's no doubt that snow from the sidewalk is going onto private property, because when I blow my snow, I blow it into my yard, or I shovel it into my yard, not out into the street or even on the boulevard usually. So I think the point that Mr. Powman made is, where's the snow going today? It goes into the private property because the private property owner is allowed to do that, whereas the city is not allowed to do that currently.
Yep. No, I understand the point you're making. I guess the discrepancy I see with that is like, that's certainly true in certain parts of the city where we have yards. The parts of the city where the greatest amount of violations are right now, where I live, where I represent the densest parts of the city, we don't have front yards that we store our snow on. We actually store most of our snow on the boulevard in between the street and the sidewalk. That's public property, right? And a lot of snow is stored over there, and will continue to be. And I understand that's not the case everywhere, and that's a very broad generalization to make, in the same way that it's a very broad generalization to make to say that the vast majority of snow that gets removed from sidewalks goes onto private property. We don't really know that. That's not true in my experience, at least, and it is true in yours. So the truth is somewhere in the middle of those two things, right? Like, some is going on private property, some is going on a public boulevard. Some gets removed, you would know more. But okay, kind of staying on this point, in the report, I think it's around page 38, 39, under the snow removal and disposal section, page 38, there's an ongoing cost for snow removal and disposal of snow cleared from public sidewalks, estimated at $9.8 million per year. I want to just specifically talk about the disposal of snow and the cost associated with that. How, of this 9.8, how much are you associating with the disposal of snow? How much is spent on that right now? And where is all that snow going right now?
Mr. Palman.
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, the costs that we calculated to haul snow are based on current contracts that we have for hauling snow. And they were hauled to a location, within the city that we were able to use as, for snow storage. Does that answer your question? Yeah, so then those are contracts that exist already. This isn't a new cost we would be incurring. Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, this would be in addition to some of the snow hauling that we do right now, associated with street clearing. These costs were calculated, using an assumption that in the pedestrian priority network, for example, much of the snow would need to be hauled out. If in reality, we were performing this program and we noticed that we had more snow storage than what we thought we would, this cost would then be less. Understood. Got it. Okay, thank you. This is very helpful. Okay, so can we talk a little bit about operating costs next, and the capital
required to remove the infrastructure costs. So I understand we talked a little bit about like electric options, and I'm not sure if they're not available for purchase at like at a bulk rate that would be associated in a use like this. But I know our office did just like a little bit of research and found like a couple of different electric options for this equipment, and we're just thinking about like the reduction in diesel costs, the reduction in some maintenance costs associated. So I know you touched a little bit on why those electric options present a different or unique set of challenges. I'm just wondering if you can speak to that a little bit more. Yeah.
Mr. Palman.
Sure, Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, in our research, we did reach out to several vendors asking about the availability of electric equipment, which we are very interested in. The feedback that we got is that the industry is just not there yet in that would have the equipment capable of doing, what we need done. I think we did outline the challenges in charging and things like that as well. Currently, diesel-powered equipment, under that operation, we would have a fuel truck that would go around, on a route, basically refueling, the snow removal equipment. Where with the electric equipment, we would need to try to figure out some charging stations, and then the associated time, with the charging as well.
Got it. Yeah. Just, I'm happy to pause here and come back if you want to go to other council members. I've got a few more questions, but I really am okay to pause and give it to somebody else.
I'll just turn to my other council members. I think if that's okay, you can continue on. It
Okay.
looks like that's fine. Thank you.
Excellent.
Councilmember Chugtai.
Thank you. Just the last couple of sections, hoping we can talk about benefits, challenges, and additional considerations. Starting with benefits, I think this is a really excellent set of benefits that we've started with here, and a thing that I noticed missing perhaps, or just we all look at things from different perspectives. These are all benefits that are very internal to the city, right? Internal to how we think about it at an enterprise level. And a couple of things that I just noticed were missing here was, like a reduction in injuries and falls in the winter months, and the impact that has on residents and associated healthcare costs in the winter months when we see a higher level of hospitalizations, longer wait times in emergency rooms and urgent cares, a reduction in falls and hospital visits associated with that, and healthcare costs associated with that. Feels like a pretty big public benefit to me, to the average resident, and if it is something that I'm hoping we are considering when we look at the bigger picture of why people would even want such a thing. I don't know if there were other more public-facing benefits that were considered as you were doing your research, or as you were putting this report together. Sorry.
Mr. Palman.
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, we tried to consider every benefit that we could think of, and I think generally we just started with the sidewalks will be clearer, which would absolutely result in less falls, less injuries, and a whole bunch of other things like that. But that's great feedback, and I'm sure there are other benefits that we aren't thinking of, with a high-level analysis.
For sure, yeah. And, I think another piece that I was thinking about is, just the amount of people who earn, less than $35,000 per year, people who don't have a car, which includes 1 in 3 Black residents in the city, who rely on public transportation to get from place to place, whether it's work or any other activity in their life, who I see a clear benefit in being able to navigate our streets in half of the year. And that additional lens of public benefit that is specific to underserved populations. That I see missing here right now, but I know you did a high-level analysis, but wanted to add that as something for your consideration.
Director.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Chugtai, I think those two items are actually wrapped into bullet point 1 and bullet point 2. Doesn't explicitly talk about slips and falls, but a consistent predictability and reliability of the sidewalk system for all users means all users. And the TAP goals absolutely support mode shift. We're going to talk about that later on at the end of the meeting, hopefully a little bit, but that is to the goals of the city, which are to the goals of the residents, which is to see more trips taken by other modes, including walking or biking.
Yep. And then on challenges, if we move to the next slide, this feels like a really good and thoughtful list of challenges. A question I had is, these are all challenges that right now we are experiencing with clearing streets, and like that streets aren't being cleared as quickly, or we have staffing and labor shortages, or damages to personal property from city equipment. Those are all things that happen right now with street plowing. So the question I have is, like, how have we addressed that with the years and years of experience we have with street clearing?
Mr. Baumann.
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, yeah, we do deal with property damage claims and things like that. We see those with the street plowing. One difference with street plowing is, in a snow emergency, we have 3 days to complete it. We don't have a bare pavement standard for our residential streets, which under ordinance we would have with this. And so you're correct that, a lot of the challenges are the same. Just the logistics of performing each program are a little bit different in terms of, level of service and timing and things like that.
Yeah, perhaps not right now, but would love to hear a little bit more about how some of these challenges are addressed in our street plowing right now, because I would imagine there's a lot of important lessons to be learned about, like clearing not happening as quickly, or the freeze-thaw cycles, and the impact on roads, and how we could apply that to our sidewalks, just since there's so much institutional knowledge that we have there. And then, finally, under additional considerations with the increased salt, that's the next slide, increased salt, sand, and alternative de-icing materials citywide. I would, right now, there are people residents use these de-icing materials citywide on their own. There's a disproportionate way in which people use it. Some people oversalt, some people undersalt. I think at our last meeting, we had a presentation on appropriate levels of use and and how much we know within our city enterprise about what an appropriate level of usage is. I'm interested in why there would be an increase in those materials being used instead of a healthy level being used across the board when it's city-led.
Mr. Baumann.
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, all of our public works service workers do go through Smart Salt training. And so a program run by city personnel, we would essentially have professionals in the use of salt and sand doing it. So increased might not be the right word. It will be more consistent. And so I think the word increased is there because we know we don't have 100% compliance right now. And perhaps we use the word increase knowing that, we would be treating areas that aren't currently treated. But again, in a high level analysis, maybe in the real world it wouldn't be increased and with professionals running the program.
Yeah, well, and in the places where there's over salting happening, you wouldn't see that either, right? Which we know is pretty harmful too.
Councilmember Johnson, or Chair Johnson and Councilmember Chugtai, we did see some interesting pictures throughout this research of like an inch of sand on some sidewalks. So yeah, we would have a much more consistent level of treatment.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I just want to start on the phased approach because we've referenced kind of the guiding focus around this report is being in compliance with the ordinance. And actually on page, and I'm going to reference a lot in the report, but on page 32, it states directly, that only one scenario that guides kind of the analysis of this report based off of compliance with our city ordinance, that's basically have shaped kind of the analysis of this report. So in thinking of that, is it fair to say that the current ordinance is somewhat a barrier right now to the flexibility needed to provide a multitude of options in doing a city-led program? I know in the legislative directive, for instance, point 3A, we requested, Councilmember Chucktai and I, to include draft proposals and stages for, frequencies and of a city-led program. And what I saw from this section was saying we can't really do that because where our ordinance is right now. So just want to know as a policymaker, is this currently the kind of barrier for that flexibility?
Mr. Palman?
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Wansley, yes, we did use the ordinance heavily as our baseline as to where to start. We do recognize, though, that our numbers are scalable. And so I think it would be, I think we could come up with cost estimates for a number of different scenarios. We know that even changing one variable, say making one pass instead of two, changes the numbers significantly. And so as a follow-up, I think we would be able to cost out basically any number of different scenarios regarding snow clearing.
Yeah, I would ask if the chairs, because that was requested in the LD to have those proposals to also look at simultaneously with what was presented today that's based off of that 50 trace events. I think it would be good because I think all of us, as I think Councilmember Payne raised, we want to see the wide variety of options that's present to do this great work. And from what I saw immediately on that section in the report, it says that our ordinance is a barrier. And also I would love to get thoughts too on, what are some of the additional barriers or opportunities in the current ordinance language that supports, the providing of different variable scenarios that we would like to see in this type of work.
Councilmember, can you remind me in the direction, did it specify what the actual scenarios were that you were interested in the numbers on? Did it, for instance, say only if there's a snow emergency? Those sorts of things?
I can read what's in the legislative directive. So 3A says include draft proposals for stages and frequency of city-led removal during and after snowfalls with breakdowns of costs for these potential stages and frequencies. So I remember in meeting with staff, I know you were part of some of those meetings, we did talk about, again, having those expanded options, but we didn't see that. And I figure it's because of what was stated here on page 32, where it says we just want to use the ordinance as a baseline. But it's good to hear that, we can receive that information. And it sounds like maybe a follow-up presentation on that in this committee, if that's something you would be supportive of.
Councilmember Wanze, I think what would be helpful would be if there were specific scenarios that you and if in partnership, Councilmember Chugtai, I think you were a co-author on this, correct? I think if you have specific scenarios you would like to see, that would be ideal because then staff would have clear direction around that. It sounds like from Mr. Palman's comments, there's really an infinite number of scenarios or potentials. And so I think some of those things would be probably helpful for them. I could think of some off my head, for instance, would be like if there's a snow emergency declared, maybe that would be of value. A program like this would be of value because it would help residents with high accumulations of snow, but otherwise they would be responsible for their own sidewalks. Or maybe we don't want down to the bare pavement, and so we can eliminate the second pass. But then, of course, there might be consequences with that too, where that increases the slipperiness of sidewalks and those sorts of things. So I think it would be helpful, I'm guessing, for staff to know what specific scenarios the authors would like if you're asking for a follow-up in committee.
I know our co-author wants to chime in. I do want to note that when we all met to craft this, there was shared agreement around this language to not be overly prescriptive. And I also want to share what's stated in this report too. Staff did, it says right here, while multiple scenarios were initially explored, so it did, I think we trust staff to be able to lay out those different variables that, you just mentioned. And it seems like there was an effort to do that, but was not presented because of the ordinance. So I think we're just asking, what were some of those initial, scenarios that staff seemed to already explore that they felt they couldn't bring forward today because of the ordinance? But I'll let my co-author also speak to that.
Councilmember Choktai?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Johnson. I remember in our conversations with Director Anderson Kelleher in the lead up to bringing this legislative directive forward, there was actually some a pretty clear ask that was made from the director as we were going back and forth on this to not be overly prescriptive about what those scenarios could be. But we did talk about, well, let's consider the threshold being snow emergencies or 1 inch of snow or like something in between, or every snow event. So those were conversations we had, and at the request of staff, that level of detail was not included in the legislative directive out of just trust and respect for a very clear ask that was made of us.
Thank you, Councilmember. Director?
So thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. I don't want to say the ordinance is a barrier, but the ordinance is our baseline. I think that's the fair way to say this. And that is the law in the city right now. And so to give residents the expectation of what does it take to do a city-led effort that meets the ordinance, we have to go to bare pavement. And that was the decision that was made to scope the costs on the full implementation program. I think that, I just have to point out that if we don't go there, and if we did what the previous study did, which was only snow emergencies, you're leaving residents, again, responsible for most of the snow events. And would there be confusion? Would there be more lack of compliance? We don't know, right? But you could surmise that actually not going to the bare pavement ordinance, which is probably the safest ordinance in terms of walking, then we're not delivering on the promise we're making as the city. And what we wanted to provide for all of you is the very best estimate of what it means to do a full city-led municipal sidewalk clearing operation that meets our residents' expectations of bare pavement.
Thank you, Director. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you. Yeah, if I could just reset, my original question was again around if there was potential recommendations in the ordinance language, which staff can do. We know staff recommends changes or things that allows us to have those scenarios. I was just interested in seeing, because this is listed in the report, that there were other scenarios that were explored that might have different estimates, and would have liked to see that information for consideration today, because I did see that as fitting into that 3A section that I just read on the legislative directive. So it was really affirming to hear if we can get that information. I think that's what we would like to hear. And if we want to marinate as policymakers on what changes in the ordinance can be made to reflect that, that's within our authority. But just, again, expanding all options and wanting to be able to see that information. So that was the baseline of my question that kind of meander further, and seeing if there would be receptivity, because it's one thing I just getting out of the practice of, I'll follow up with you directly and you send the information to me. This is a legislative directive that this body passed, and making sure that information is publicly available. So I want to be like, if they do have those additional figures, can that come back to the committee so the public can also be able to see that? So that's why I asked that question too, to kind of loop back on the transparency.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. And if I may ask you for a point of clarification, and I think this would be helpful as we're marinating on this, and as staff, just so they can understand, is the idea of trying to essentially lower the expectations in the existing ordinance today so we can reduce the price of what a citywide program would look like, or would it be like increasing expectations so that there's even better? Like, for instance, doing carriage walks and offering people, potentially their sidewalks. Is there some direction around that? Is there any kind of more information you could provide around what the recommendation is? Because right now it's to the bare pavement within 24 hours, full width.
I
And so
think-
would it be extending the amount of time or those sort of things to clear the sidewalks?
Yeah, I think if the staff wants to share, again, the multiple scenarios, I'm interested in what literally staff wrote here on page 32 of like, what were those initial scenarios that were explored? So if that work was already done, if we could just share that, I'm just restating that from the report.
Sure, and Director, I don't know if there's anything you want to add in addition to the answer you already provided around.
I do, Mr.
the
Chair.
challenges, if
Well,
it's
it's
only
not-
one, or if it's only during snow emergencies and such, Director.
So, Mr. Chair, it's not that there are a whole bunch of other scenarios that were built out here. There was a very early decision made that following the ordinance was going to be, since it's the law of the city, it's the obligation that we have to follow the ordinance. There are no other calculations done right now on, 1 inch or an updated snow emergency only plan. Now, those could happen. If you all wanted those, I'm sure we could go back and do further work on them. But there's no separate set of calculations sitting somewhere in terms of this team's work. This team's work has focused on bare pavement within 24 hours.
Thank you, Director. Councilmember?
Yeah, I know I had a lot more questions. Again, I'm just regurgitating what is written on this report and was happy to see there was other multiple scenarios that were initially explored. One is to just simply see what those were. So did not think that would take 10 minutes by itself. But if there's a way to get a sense of what that was, that would be great. Other segue question I had was around labor, because you go pretty in depth into the workforce development piece. So I know outside of sidewalk or potential sidewalk plowing and snow removal, Public Works this year began, focusing on sustainable landscaping. And I know actually Council President and I passed a budget amendment around that last year to support that work and really advance that green jobs piece that's going to be so crucial to the development of our green economy. And I know during that time there was lots of conversations had, around whether that work would happen in-house or contracted because of the seasonal nature of that work, which is clearly also outlined here too. So just while completing this legislative directive, were there any considerations around what it would look like to have cross-trained workers to fulfill these type of services? So again, those sustainable landscapers, so it's not just, in the summer, they can be on-ramped into winter work. So I just wanted to see, if that was considered in addressing the workforce continuity piece that you go into on page 23.
Mr. Baumann?
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Wansley, yes, we did ask ourselves, with our full-time staff, what would they do in the summertime? And sustainable, maintaining green infrastructure was one of the things that we talked about. Again, with labor, there's so many variables. We did choose a lot of the labor to be temporary. We don't know for sure what the labor market would be 2 or 3 years from now. And so, it might actually be more full-time employees. It might actually be the use of contractors. We're not sure in this high-level analysis, but yeah, we definitely, I think, would be able to keep the number that we had proposed of the 30 employees busy in the summertime.
And then my next questions relate to frequency that's addressed on page 33 in the report, but also page 15, and thinking of, right now it states Public Works randomly, and I'm going to, let me make sure that's correct here. Yep. Right now, Public Works on page 15 randomly selects grids across the city for proactive sidewalk inspection. Is this the sample area that staff use for the 95% compliance stat that I've heard a couple of times be referenced throughout this presentation?
Mr. Hammond, Ms. Novak, Director.
Mr. Chair, there's a lot of collaborative work in this one. Yes, Councilmember Wansley, that is the group, and we did, I think in the study session, there was some question, and we did involve OPI in reanalyzing whether we had a valid sample and whether the process we're using, because remember at one point we said, well, maybe we should throw that out and not use it anymore. And OPI actually said back, Public Works has a very good way of doing that random sample. So that is the random sample.
But, and just to follow up on that, but that random sample that we're basing the 95%, that doesn't reflect the entire city. Is that correct? Or the whole city?
Mr. Chair, it moves. It is a series, and maybe Mr. Jelly would like to get up and talk about it. He is the author of doing that, and so he has a lot of knowledge about it.
Yeah, and then Mr. Jelly, not to steal your thunder, I do know that random sampling as well is like the gold standard for figuring that out, and you're not going to hit every block necessarily. Mr. Jelly?
Good afternoon, committee, Chair Johnson, and committee members, Brett Jelly, Deputy Director of Public Works. Yes, we actually split the city into 4 quadrants, and then we have grid numbers within each quadrant, and we randomly select numbers at the beginning of the season, and then as we go through the season, each one of those quadrants has a set number of quadrants inspected by our proactive inspectors. So it is citywide.
Okay, so random sampling throughout these quadrants is being leveraged as a citywide figure from what I'm hearing. The reason why I raised that is I think Councilmember Chektai also shared this a little bit in the comments of we often hear, and I think during that time, as you mentioned, there was lots of report of, okay, we're doing good. There's only 5% of, folks who are not doing their due diligence, the 95, good job. But then we get hit up and said, that's not reflective of my street. That's not reflective of my sidewalk. So we're interested to know if that was still the baseline of looking at how we're doing demographic analysis in this report of that 95% figure. And it seems like it is. So I'm glad that you broke that down. And then in terms of next questions around the cost on page 37 now. Page 37, it's basically states that the fiscal analysis of a city-led option would include capital costs for each phase. Just for clarification, can staff, can you all confirm basically that the capital costs in machine and equipment is under the assumption that there will be 50 snow events in a year that, our staff will be responding to?
Mr. Palman?
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Wansley, that is correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. And next question, in terms of, I know you had some of the photos of like the suburbs and their kind of comparative sidewalks. I did want to know, did staff do any comparative analysis with other, cities in the U.S., and even getting a sense of the cost, like Bloomington, for instance, which I believe they service 250 miles of sidewalks. So just wanted to see, I know there was some comparative cost that was provided in the targeted section, like you list Portland, for instance, and Rhode Island, but that was around how they're doing targeted programs for seniors, but wanted to see if you did something similar for like city-led programs.
Mr. Palman?
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Wansley, yes, we did talk to the city of Bloomington, and they were able to help us, get an idea of how many miles could be done in a day with the kind of equipment that we're talking about. We also reached out to the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and asked the same kinds of questions.
Perfect. And then also just a loop back question to something that Councilmember Chektai raised around what we're doing with existing snow that's around the boulevards right now. So I somewhat caught a piece of that right now. The cost is estimated for $9.8 million. Again, who currently is in charge of removing the snow for those parts of the city now?
Mr. Palman?
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Wansley, I think it's probably multiple parties. It could be part of an SSD or the Downtown Improvement District, or it could be a private property, a different private property owner that remove some of the snow as well as maybe the city in some cases.
So the cost of that right now is somewhat shared, that $9.8 million kind of estimate. Do we have a breakdown of, from the multitude of stakeholders that you named, kind of what that looks like per stakeholder?
Mr. Plowman.
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Wansley, we did not do a detailed breakdown of where we think the snow is currently being hauled and by
Okay.
whom.
Okay. And then this goes to my last question, something that Councilmember Chuck Ty raised and what was noted in the study of knowing that renters have been predominantly impacted, or rental properties, and knowing that those rental properties also extend to single-family homes that's being leased as rental properties. I know this is also a major case in Como, which was also noted in the report. And so much so, my office actually met with Rec Services to learn more about how we could hold landlords accountable for unsafe conditions on their properties, and wanted to see if there's a way to tie snow and ice, violations to properties rental licenses. Because again, knowing this is a major bit in Como, what we were basically informed is that that's not something that Rec Services plans to pursue at the time, but just wanted to see if Public Works had you all consider, in light of, the findings here, any alternative ways to strengthen fee in violations for repeat property owners, especially those that hold several rental licenses. Start there.
Ms. Novak.
Thank you, Chair and Council Member. That is something that is mentioned in a draft proposal and conversations and brainstorming about what those could look like. Not cleaning or clearing the sidewalks, either public or private, is essentially negligent management. So how do you tie that to a rental license? We know that there are tiering. Tier 1 is great. You don't get as many inspections. Tier 2, Tier 3, not great. You get more inspections. So there could potentially be additional conversations around that, especially since we know that multifamily property managers are overrepresented in these complaints. And within a season and year over year, and in our densest areas where there is more pedestrian priority network sidewalks.
That's really affirming to hear. My office would absolutely love to work with you on that, because again, as I mentioned and as highlighted in this report, Como is definitely one of the places where we see this happen most repeatedly. And as you mentioned, it is part of negligence. So we want to, be part of supporting all of our streets to be safe. And if it means looking at and reevaluating rental licenses as a tool to help reinforce that, really excited to hear that as another potential action item to move forward. But yeah, those were all of the questions that I had. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Building off of my previous comment around my appreciation of the various menu of options, I'll put my cards on the table. I think regardless of what we do, I would love to see us implement the online tool. But in looking at the report and the data sources, it looks like it's built heavily off of GPS trackers from our fleet vehicles. And so I'm curious around the dependencies of to what degree do we need to implement the touching grass component of this, or touching snow component of this, I guess, to be able to populate the data for this dashboard. So I would presume we would be able to leverage our snow plows for streets level data, but for sidewalks, I'm not sure what the data source would be if we didn't go all the way in and all the way through with the snow clearing. Would we be able to integrate 311 complaints and have that be an augmentation to the real-time snow plowing? Or I'm just curious about, like, to what degree can we implement the data dashboard that's a public-facing resource, and what the data sources might be depending on how far we go in terms of building out the infrastructure for actual snow clearing.
Well, Councilmember Payne, maybe I'll ask for clarification. Are you asking around, if not fully citywide clearing, can we put complaints online for sidewalks from 311 today?
Well, and so the cost estimate, if you go to the slide for implementation costs, we have streets and adding sidewalks. And so it seems pretty clear to me that we would be able to do the streets leveraging the GPS data of our snow plows. But then, so I'm saying, yes, let's actually do that. Like, that, I feel like let's do that. But my follow-on question is, to what extent could we include sidewalk information? And would it exclusively be 311 if we don't actually implement, the fleet vehicles necessary to actually clear the sidewalks to get the real-time GPS data?
And Councilmember Payne, and so this one may fall slightly to the city attorneys. I know there was a conversation around 311 as well in complaints with the clerk's office earlier this year, in which our reports now are redacted over complaints on personal property. I know there were some legal concerns around that, and so they removed the exact address so we can know what block a complaint is on, but not necessarily what property. And so for maybe additional expanding on your question, though, because I think you mentioned other pieces too beyond 311 complaints as well as 311 complaints. So looks like Mr. Jelly might have some thoughts on that. Mr. Jelly.
Chair Johnson, Councilmember Payne, you are correct in that we have the tools to do streets. To do the similar thing with sidewalks, we have two big gaps. One is centerline data on sidewalks, so we need to get that, which we are interested in getting. But then two, if we would be using the equipment that would be on the sidewalks to track our progress, and so if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to do kind of a similar progress report, and then it would be a matter of what other type of data I guess the city has that we could integrate.
Clarifying question, but today, if we passed a budget that included the investments laid out here, we could do this for streets. We have the data sources for that. Or would we also need capital budget for GPS trackers for our fleet vehicles?
Chair Johnson, Councilmember Payne, we do have the infrastructure to do that. One thing I want to clarify, because this was a conversation in 2002 and 3 around this. There was interest in being able to have a map that shows people the street's fully plowed, therefore you can park. That is not what this is, just to be clear.
I read that.
This is based on kind of best what we're seeing in the industry and being able to communicate that, plows we're down that street within this amount of time, which isn't necessarily the same thing as your plow is complete, or your street is completely plowed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I just had a quick question about the 311 call reduction. I wasn't expecting that. I thought calls would go up. As someone who gets lots of complaints after snow emergencies for, most of the time it's the job wasn't done well enough. I would think that calls would go up for sidewalk plowing. I mean, I know I'm very particular about how I like my sidewalk plowed, and so is my husband. And when the neighbor kid comes over, he's standing outside over him. So I'm expecting calls to go up after this, but you all really think that it's gonna go down? And
Mr.
why do you think that?
Mr. Palmer.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Chair Johnson,
Mr. Chair,
Oh, Director, yes.
Councilmember Vita, if there was a hot topic of debate in the last week as we went through this was the hot topic of debate. Do the 311 calls go down, or do they go up? And we did a good debate in the room about what we thought. We don't know. Right? I mean, that's the truth. The truth is we don't know if we implemented this, does it mean that, because it might not be just condition, but it might be, where's the person doing my sidewalk, right? And you might get a lot more of those right off the bat. And so we're not so sure. We think that in terms of the number of complaints exactly on condition, they will go down because we're going to have better consistency. But there might be a whole different set of complaints that go up about where's the person doing my sidewalk? Why haven't they shown up today? They just woke up my sleeping, mother, twin, baby, whatever. I mean, I could see all those scenarios happening. So we don't know.
Okay, let's say we don't know and we don't agree, because I think that it's gonna go up because of some of those reasons. The time of day it's done, who's doing it, if someone comes the week before and they're better, you're gonna get complaints about, well, the guy that was here or the woman that was here last week was much better than this person, you know, and I'm just thinking about, as a person who has so much going on in my ward, like, I don't want this added to it. I get enough complaints about the alley. I get enough complaints about the streets and like where parking is. You know, I get enough complaints about fire trucks getting through and ambulances that this just feels like it could add on way more than our city can handle right now. My second question is, do you all use pet-friendly salt sand mixture for the streets and the sidewalks?
Mr. Potvin?
Chair Johnson and Councilmember Vita, the salt that we use is regular salt. And
No,
so
thank you.
I do get some feedback about puppies or dogs' paws and things like that from time to time and those concerns.
Yes, I use some really cool stuff because I don't want my dog to ingest, you know, the city stuff. So that would be, and it's way more expensive than regular stuff. So there's an added amount to getting the stuff that I like. And I would like you all to use that at my house if you were gonna come and plow my sidewalk. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. And I have a couple of questions as well. And then I see Councilmember Koski, our Vice Chair Koski does too. So first off, again, thank you so much for the presentation. Really, really helpful. Really appreciate it. Very well done. On the 6.3% approach, 5% approach, whatever we want to call it, you came up with some pilot suggestions, which I think is really helpful. But clearly, it's not a estimated scenario like citywide. Do you have any ballpark idea on what the full cost of doing like a 6.3% or 5% approach where we're making sure we're inspecting every sidewalk across the city regularly after snowfall events, that we have essentially crews that can go to violators and do both the snow case workers and the clearing? Do we have any idea of what that would be, ballpark? I mean, I'm assuming or guessing it would be an order of magnitude less than this program, but I don't know. Was there any playing around with that number-wise or exploration number-wise?
Chair Johnson and members of the council, regarding the equipment that would need to be purchased for a scaled-down mileage, I think it percentage-wise scales down to whatever, you know, amount of the city you want to do from the prices that we're seeing right here. That doesn't factor in the inspection personnel and the costs of keeping track of the data and all the things like that.
So it sounds like, thank you, it sounds like that would probably be, for the actual clearing, 6.8% of this cost, but then you'd have additional costs on the citywide inspection and some of the data work and all of that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then how many pieces of equipment are we talking about? It seems like there's a lot. I mean, there's trucks, there's trailers, there's the brushes, there's the plows, because there's a storage component to this too. And I guess where I'm going with this is how much storage is required. I know, for instance, the Public Works with the plans that the Hiawatha campus expansion, Roof Depot, there was a proposal to build a parking ramp just to store equipment. I mean, are we talking, and obviously that's now changed because of the agreement worked out with the legislature and Public Works and administration around an opportunity for the community to buy that site. And, you know, so I don't want to get too specific to that and considering how many additional floors if that wasn't the case, but I'm trying to understand, I guess, how many spaces, like what kind of storage facility are we talking here? And what's the requirements, and do we have anything identified around that? Or
Chair-
where would that happen?
Chair
Mr.
Johnson,
Palmer?
in terms of amounts of equipment, the machine that you saw with the snow blower and the machine that you saw with the broom would be 56 each for a total of 112 pieces of snow removal equipment. As I said, some of it would need to be hauled throughout the city, and so we did factor in 92 each truck and trailer to haul that equipment around. In year two of the capital expenditures, we did estimate $3 million for some sort of a storage facility / maintenance facility for all of this new equipment.
All right, that's very helpful. So, and when you say 92 trucks and trailers, is that 92 each for 184?
Yes,
Or
it would
is
be
that-
92 trucks and 92 trailers.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Vice Chair Koski?
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I had a question about the cruise. I know you had the actual dollar amount of what that would look like, but do you have a number of how many people we would need, or did I miss that in the details? I saw the labor operating costs, but I didn't see the actual, like, do you have an estimate of how many full-time staff and part-time staff you think it would take to do? And I understand I'm asking you this question, and you've shown us phased approaches here too, so I'm not sure if you have that.
Mr. Palman.
Chair Johnson and Vice Chair Koski, we were estimating 30 full-time employees, and I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood, I don't have it here, of around 180 temporary employees, but I could certainly get you the exact number that we estimated when I find it.
Okay, thank you, that's really helpful. And then I just wanted to say thank you so much for the work that you put into it and the thoroughness of this information, and it's just been really helpful to get a clearer picture. I also think that the presentation is really digestible for our constituents, that we can be able to send them this information, so it's really helpful with the pictures, the diagrams, all of that. So I just want to say thank you so much for all of the hard work and making it digestible for our constituents as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think we might be at the end of the questions part. So unless I see any others from committee members, I think you two, thank you so much, Mr. Palman and Ms. Novak. And so we'll turn to any sort of comments from council members. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I just wanted to say thank you, staff, for this presentation. It's confirmed for me more than anything that I want to continue shoveling my own snow. I want to use my own products on my property. I want to put my snow on my grass, on my plants, so they can melt for winter blossoms. I have about 2,500 tulips in my yard, and I love the snow. You know, it helps to melt. When it melts, it helps to grow. And I also love just being out with my neighbors in the winter months. This is one of the only ways I get to be out with my neighbors is plowing or shoveling. You know, it's kind of like the summertime when we're all sitting in our backyard. So I don't support this. I do think that there are some things we can do, some pilots and some ways we can help our seniors and our most vulnerable populations. But I personally like my husband shoveling. It keeps him busy when I'm busy doing other things. And I love my dog having pet-friendly salt. I love speaking to my neighbors in the winter months. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I think Councilmember checks how you raise this, but in terms of, I know residents will see this and see, the sticker shock immediately. But recognizing we're already paying this and more when we look at the social cost of not making sure that our sidewalks are either safe and accessible to every single resident, regardless if you are a senior, if you are experiencing mobility issues, if you have children, which I hear all the time that in the winter, folks face the greatest amount of social isolation, or we're seeing increases in trips to the ER because residents are hurting themselves by going to do exactly that, walk down the street, which is what in our transit, TAP program, Transit Action Plan, we want to make sure our residents are able to walk and visit all parts of their neighborhoods all throughout the year because we live in the Arctic jungle, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And the fact that there's thousands of our residents who don't have that mobility during a big chunk of the year is really sad. And this is actually a really easy solution to make sure that we're meeting that public need for our residents and recognizing we can do that over time. And we've done that. We recognize getting to a 15 minimum wage was not going to happen overnight, but we took the time to say, let's phase this in because no worker in our city deserves poverty wages. So when there's a political will, we can absolutely make all sorts of things happen to meet the needs of the public. And I wish this was something we could put on the ballot because I would love for the people to make a referendum on this because I think it will overwhelmingly pass because, again, we see that in light of what happened even yesterday with the air quality, climate change is here. we had dozens of residents show up and said, climate crisis is real and we need to make bold investments to meet that reality. And while we're trying to do that in some ways, this is a clear way in which we can get there, because we should not be relying on the Good Samaritan like Council Member Vital and her husband, just waking up at the crack of dawn to meet that need. That's a public need, and this is what we're here to do, is to meet the needs of the public. That's why we're elected. So I'm really excited to continue conversations with constituents and staff around how we blaze a path forward to making sure that our streets are actually safe. This is part of public safety. And right now, this is the part where we're experiencing great amount of shortcomings. So I'm really excited to do this work with you all and with our staff as we prepare for another winter.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Chair Koski. Oh. All right. Any other council members with any comments on this? So I'll just say a few things on this. First, and I think this is probably the third time I've said it, but thank you again so much to staff for your work on this. It was really thorough. I'm really happy to see as well a number of different pilots brought forward with some numbers. I think that was something Council Member Chugtai mentioned, is just not having solely, hey, this big price tag item or status quo, but having some options in between and some things for us to think about in terms of next steps. I also think, as much as, to Councilmember Wansley's point, there's going to be sticker shock that if the Star Tribune writes about this or what have you, some people may see that and go, oh, I think we got to take a step back here and think about what even the intent and the goal around the staff direction was. And I think that's where we should be centering ourselves, which is that, to Councilmember Wansley's point, this is a year-round, or this is a winter city. People need to get around safely. A theme that we heard today was around that safety piece. It's about accessibility, it's about safety, and that is critical. And the system that we have today isn't good enough. And it's great that 95% of people are out there doing their job, shoveling as they should, and that's wonderful, and I'm thankful for that. Also, if that was to be equally applied across the city, that would be one person on each block that doesn't do their duty, and that would make that block impassable in that case. And so clearly more needs to be done around this, and so again, very excited by the different options available to us. Frankly, I'm a bit surprised that the price tag was this low, even though the sticker shock, it is a monumental task doing something like this. I frankly thought it probably would have been more around 50 million. So kudos to you all for figuring out a way to get below that number. I think frankly with 39 million plus a year, that is going to be very challenging for this council. During last year's budget, I believe the largest ongoing budget amendment from the council was less than 1% of that, at just over $350,000. And I believe that was a very close 7-6 vote on that item as well. If you add up 15 departments of the city, this would be more than their collective budgets. And in fact, if it was its own standalone department, it would be in just behind cumulatively all of Public Works, followed by the police department, followed by the fire department, and then that's where this would be ahead of, for instance, CPED's entire budget. I'm glad to see some of these different options available, piloting the snow ambassadors, potential mobile team model pilot with snow case workers. I think this was mentioned before by Councilmember Wansley, adjusting the fees upwards for different property types, which is something that staff provided as an option as well. I think are all things we shouldn't just explore, but are things we should do. And then I hope this committee, in our work together and in work with the budget committee, can actually move the needle and do something this year in regards to taking it to that next step so that we can move towards getting to that goal, which I believe not only every committee member, but every person in this room would support, and I would hope every resident of the city would support in really making our city accessible year-round in a safe way for every resident and every visitor. So thank you again, Public Works, and I see a comment from Councilmember Chugtai.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Johnson. I really appreciate your comments around some of the things that we should actively work on implementing in this upcoming budget cycle. I'm excited about working with you and other members on moving that along to the next step and next phase. You know, I don't know that I've talked about it here, but I believe I did at a forum or something. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. My brother is 12, right? And when my mom was pregnant with Abraham, she slipped and fell, and she had a very high-risk pregnancy. She was diabetic at the time, and she broke the fall with her knees and her wrists. She broke the cartilage on her knee. She was just walking to the car to go get groceries, I think, or she was going to a doctor's appointment maybe. And the sidewalk wasn't properly salted. That's how this entire thing happened. She, I think it was around 7 months pregnant at that time, so they couldn't do anything about her knee. So she had to wait until after she gave birth, and after she gave birth, she had other complications from, again, having a high-risk pregnancy. So it was about a year before they could do anything to address her knee. And during that entire time, things like walking, standing up, sitting down were very painful and uncomfortable. And this has resulted in a 12-year-long challenge with mobility for her. She's in her 40s and cannot go upstairs, period, ever anymore. So when we look at 1,000 problem properties and 1,000 blocks that are inaccessible, I think about the amount of people who can't navigate our streets safely and the type of costs that are associated that we can't measure that result from a slip, a fall, and injury. These are real people's lives, real families' lives that are impacted in immeasurable ways. And what we're talking about doing is making an investment in a public good, right? And all investments in accessibility and safety, all public goods are expensive. That's the reality. The challenge we have in front of us is figuring out to what extent and in what ways and over what timeline is making our city more safe and more accessible possible. So I hope that's a thing that we all think about. And sticker shock and costs, that's a real thing that we got to struggle with. But underneath all of that are real people's lives, real communities, and real families that are impacted.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other comments or questions on this item? I am not seeing any, so without objection, I'll direct the clerk to receive and file this report. And then before we conclude our meeting, I'd like to ask Director Anderson Keller to give this committee an informal verbal update on potholes, which has been a hot topic for this first half of the year.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, if I could just again thank our team. This was a team effort on this report. I hope you all could see, our goal is to give you the best information possible and to provide that, because if we're going to be asked to provide this service in the future, we want to do it at the highest caliber level for the public. And I hope you all felt that today, because I sure felt that as our team worked on it. And, Joe and Cadence led the team, but maybe raise your hand if you worked on this team in the room so that you can see how many. And then there also were folks in IT, neighborhood and community relations, OPI, the finance department who worked on this with us, so it was pretty extensive. So thank you for that. I also just want to say the story about the snow shovel came from me, because when We purchased our first home in 1991 on Vincent Avenue North. We moved in the week of October, late October, and you can see where that story is going because we had been renters before and we had no shovel. And so that was fun to figure out. You got to know your neighbors fast that year because you needed to rely on them to provide a whole bunch of things with the Halloween blizzard. I want to talk about potholes, and then, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to talk about the press conference that we did today as well. So to date, we have had 7,628 potholes reported to 311, not 911, although I think some people maybe feel like it should have been 911. We are down to a little over 1,000 not being cleared in the system. We're going through that process right now. There are differences in our districts in how those are being cleared and being matched. We do believe those are non-duplicative right now. But that is a fairly good clearance rate, but we do have some hard ones to get done. There's whole stretches of roadway that need basically not just a pothole filling, but more like it's not a mill and overlay, but we would go in and do the whole surface of that stretch of road because it's in such poor condition. So I want to just give an update. We do often have sinkholes, and sinkholes are different than potholes, as you all have learned. We've had 93 reported this year. That's not actually a high level mark for us yet, but we do see, and I think, Mr. Chair and committee members, one of the biggest reasons for this is the freeze-thaw cycle. It's not just the amount of snow we had, but the temps that we had were in such a way that created more sinkhole conditions. We're working on those. Some of those, Councilmember Chugtai knows, we have a rather large one in her ward. That is actually in the hands of the Metropolitan Council at this point for the repair, and it's taking them a little bit longer, so a few more weeks yet. So I know it's a huge inconvenience to the public when we have to close part of a street or all of a street because of the sinkhole issue, but we will continue to work on that. Mr. Chair, I should pause there on potholes and just ask if there are other questions. I will say, because I know the public watches, please continue to report those potholes and potential sinkholes. We do want to know where they are.
Yes, thank you, Director. I'm going to see if there's any questions. I saw Councilmember Payne first, followed by Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Could you just repeat the total number of reported potholes again?
7,628.
Thank you.
That was of June 1.
Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I know we're going to be getting a legislative update soon, and it's good to have the chair of IGR here too, but just knowing that the state legislature passed that Amazon delivery fee, and I know it was with the goal of really looking at, in addition to, natural events like winter, what are additional, entities that's adding, wear and tear on our streets that degrades them even further, in addition to freeze thaw and all sorts of winter activities that we have. We do have control over through climate crisis, but right now, let's distance that. Is there any conversations right now in terms of that's a potential revenue source, especially as we're having conversations around how do we support these public goods? Just wanted to know if Public Works is also in conversations with maybe it's Director Topinka around how we're imagining and supporting costs like that around potholes and things of that nature.
Director and former speaker, I'm going to say that, please.
So, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wansley, I will say that I am grateful for all of your forbearance because I spent the last 2 weeks of the session at the Capitol with the team and particularly worked with Chair Hornstein and Chair Dibble on the transportation bill. And this delivery fee is a really, groundbreaking thing. Now, it did have to be negotiated upward, I guess I would say, to deliveries over $100, and that does erode some of the effectiveness of both the collection, but also the message behind that, we are well beyond the day of, some 20 years ago when maybe the UPS truck or the Amazon truck now would come once down your street. I mean, it's quite regular. The money was divided up in the bill, but because it's more flexible money, it's not gas tax money. There are dollars coming towards a large city account that will be divided amongst large cities. MnDOT's still working on the formula and the calculation of that. We were also able to get some one-time designation. We have a new fund designated for ADA, but it only has one-time money in it right now. And so that's another place that I think we will see some progress. The other part of this, I think, so that delivery fee has real promise for the future, I think, to help us repair our aging roadways. And there were many stories at the Capitol, of course, of communities like ours who are facing this challenge. So I think we're excited about that possibility. It's a little less than maybe we would have liked to see in the future, but I think it is an important breakthrough in terms of funding. And the other thing I should just mention is the amazing amount of transit funding that was secured in this legislative session, dedicated, and that will come through the sales tax. And that, I think, is going to be a game changer for the city as well, being able to fully build out the ABRT system to be able to do some upgrades to our regular city streets in terms of the transit system. So all these things working together, I think we're getting there, but we still could use more resources.
All right, thank you, Director. And then you had one other piece just to mention.
So, Mr. Chair and committee members, and maybe Councilmember Payne can hold up the backpack, and we have at least one of these for each of our members today, and some stickers. So we did a kickoff today, and the chair and co-chair and council member Chavez joined us because we were in his ward of both the marketing campaign of the Transportation Action Plan, and we have people in the room who've been working on this for a long time. This will be an ongoing year-to-year campaign called As You Go Minneapolis, with the theme being mode shift and getting folks to shift their trips, 3 out of 5 trips, to a mode other than a gasoline-powered vehicle. And so particularly transit, walking, biking, using the scooters, using the electric bikes that we have available. And we did that today at Midtown Global Market, and we did it there because, of course, this weekend marks the beginning of Open Streets. And I want to remind you that this weekend is East Lake Street, runs from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then I'm just going to mention the next one, which is Glenwood on Sunday, July 16th. And there will be 5 throughout this season. But a great time, and we just want to urge folks to use transit, bike, and walk to get to Open Streets if they can as well. In fact, I believe there's a free bus pass available, free transit pass to get to Open Streets if you go to the Open Streets website. And then there also is a Lime discount for scooters and bikes.
Thank you, Director. My children will be very happy for the stickers. All right. Well, without objection, we will go ahead and stand this committee adjourned. Thank you.
For government to work,